You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Mika Ortega, a social change communication strategist and co-host of the A Hoot podcast. Welcome to part 2 of our two-part series on the Moveable Middle. In part 1, we discussed who the Moveable Middle is and their attitudes toward human rights. So let's recap. The Moveable Middle are those who sit in the middle of a spectrum of receptiveness to human rights messages and positive social change. They are movable in the sense that their mindsets and attitudes can be influenced either way, towards resistors of human rights or the advocates of human rights. The movable middle is often referred to as the persuadables. In this episode, we'll talk about evidence-based recommendations on what advocates can do to move the middle. These recommendations are based on Wise Owl's multi-method qualitative research as well as various prototyping and communication laboratory activities from 2020 to 2023. First, remember to make human rights human. This might seem obvious, but as they say, the obvious is often invisible. When we say make human rights human, we mean that we should present human rights issues in a way that resonates with people's everyday experiences and emotions. It has to be alive in the here and now. How else will we embody the essence of human rights? That they are inherent, that we are all born with these rights. Last year, in one of Wise Owl's planning workshops, a seasoned human rights defender reflected that, admittedly, in the heat of our struggle, we lose sight of our audience. We end up churning material after material, transmitting fact after fact. The flurry of activities sometimes makes us forget that the audience is human, with their motivations, fears, and dreams. They're not just statistics, but dynamic people full of life and full of contradictions. As human rights and democracy advocates, we need to remember that our role isn't merely to disseminate information. Our true mission is to compel, persuade, and inspire people to take action. To do that, we will need to tap into things that are quintessentially human in our culture.
Grabe po yung kasamaan nyo. Yung mga nagnakaw sa PhilHealth, kung
Kasi
sino man yun, ang grabe po ng kasamaan.
Umaasa doon yung mga nagpapadialysis.
Alam mo yung magnakaw ka pa lang, ang sama na nun.
Oo.
Pero yung magnakaw ka sa mahirap at sa mga may karamdaman, grabing kademonyohan yun.
That was Vice Ganda and Ami Perez in a clip from It's Showtime. This clip was spliced as part of Tropang Tulungan's TikTok video seeking accountability from government. The video generated high views and engagement from the Moveable Middle. What does that immediately tell us? It validates that our Moveable Middle can be animated so long as we find strategic ways to reach them. Noontime shows, beauty pageants, and popular entertainment have proven to be effective entry points for discussing more serious topics. As human rights and democracy advocates, we also need to be intentional in building positive narratives toward a greater appreciation of human rights. This means we will need to communicate what we stand for, rather than simply talking about what we're against. For example, here's Karapatan's Facebook explainer about human rights where they presented rights by highlighting our ideals of prosperity, peace, freedom of thought, and freedom of speech.
Tayong lahat ay may K. Tayong lahat ay may karapatan sa maunlad, mapayapa, at malayang pamumuhay. Tayong lahat ay may K. May karapatan sa malayang pag-iisip at paghahayag ng saloobin.
In part 1, we discussed the Moveable Middle's top values, which include love of God, compassion, and community. These values help them determine right from wrong, prioritizing social goals over individual rights. But we can harness these values in presenting human rights just as the Philippine Alliance for Human Rights Advocates, or PARA, did through their Buhat Mo, Buhat Ko campaign. To bear one another's burden. The campaign's essence was about helping each other. Para used this campaign to expand the definition of human rights and justice, including everyday values and emphasizing how inseparable rights are in our daily lives. The campaign became the thematic approach to issues around food security, extrajudicial killings, and indigenous peoples' rights, among others. Para reframed their messages, tapped into empathy and a sense of belonging, and in doing so, they were able to call people to their causes. Para also used Tropang Tulungan's Biyaya ng Bayang Pilipino as their campaign song. The song talks about God's blessings for our community and our dream of also doing what's right for other people.
Ito ang mga biyaya kung kaloob ng Diyos at bayan. Tutularan namin ng mabubuting katangian. Sa pagbuo ng bayan, kami huwag kalimutan. Ito ang nais ko at ng bahayang Pilipino.
In essence, moving the middle starts by establishing common ground with them. This means finding ways to articulate our shared values, beliefs, dreams, and experiences. It is in finding what unites us, not what divides us, that lets us call them in. In the language of public narrative, we call this the story of us, o ang kwento natin. This allows us to create a sense of community, narrating that belief in a better tomorrow. We can even address human rights issues that are hard to discuss, such as martial law. Habilin, meaning to bequeath in Filipino, is a 12-part animated series produced by Wise Owl and Puma Podcast for Samasa and the Commission on Human Rights. Habilin features the heroism of young people from the martial law years, a reminder that our freedoms are hard-won, but also all of us can shine light in the darkest of times. Habilin presents a story, a reminder of what we've been through, but also what we are capable of. This is who we are.
Light shines brightest in the darkest of places. At ang mga kwento at buhay ng ating mga bayani ang nag-ilaw ng daan. Gamit ang kanilang salita, puso, at tapang, ang isang ilaw ay naging 2, naging 4, naging libo-libo. Ang laban para sa demokrasya ng bayan ay nasa pagsama-sama at pakikiisa ng mamamayan.
As a result, Habilin has proven to be an effective and creative tool in countering disinformation. So much so that advocates, educators, and students continue to use Habilin in forums in schools. Just this year, it was featured in De La Salle University's Service Learning Program, the Asia Classroom, and the 7th Freedom of Expression Regional Conference. The movable middle is movable. We've shown you samples that exemplify best practices, but remember, to move the middle and keep them with us, we will need to tailor campaigns for each stage of their audience journey. Sabi nga ng human rights activist, kailangan natin silang sunduin. So we'll need to design those steps for them. This episode offered a few minutes glimpse into a wealth of findings over several years. We hope you found it a helpful reminder of our need to be intentional, creative, and consistent in moving the middle. Again, I'm Mika Ortega, co-host of the A Hoot podcast. This episode was written by me with substantial contributions from Oya Ariola and Jo Zanada. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, our senior news editor is Veronica Uy, and our audio editor is Freddy Blanco. To delve deeper into our study, I invite you to visit Wise Owl's website at wiseowl.ph. Don't forget to check out our podcast, Give a Hoot, available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch Habilin Season 1 on the Commission on Human Rights YouTube channel. And download the teaching guides from www.martiallawmuseum.ph. Season 2 is underway. Get updates from www.democracydiscourse.org and look for Habilin. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. At para sa mga mahilig manood sa YouTube, Puma-podcast na rin po kami doon. Just search Puma Podcast and subscribe to our channel. Salamat sa pakikinig.